Houston Texans, Houston Rockets, Houston Dynamo, Houston everything, Houston born and raised, H-Town Rebel Space Cadet Sports.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, folks of all stripes, and distinguished guests, put your hands together for the Space Cadet Sports Podcast. Houston, we have Paul Salazar Jr.
Hey y'all, welcome back to the Space Cadet Sports Podcast, your Houston sports podcast for diehard Houston sports fans from a diehard Houston sports fan. I am the aforementioned fan, your host, Paul Salazar Jr., your favorite diehard Astros fan podcaster. Add some more qualifiers to that if you'd like. I'm an actor, improviser, writer, one of those creative multi-hyphenates, but most importantly, I'm a proud Houston native, and I have the receipts to prove it. My friends, our fantasy football league is called the Thunder Bears. And that's, for those of you old enough to know, after an arena football team that briefly was in Houston. You know, I've spent the last decade or so as a comedy writer out here in Los Angeles. And now, well, I'm podcasting like all people in the entertainment industry out here. That's what happens when you hit 10 years out here in Los Angeles. You start absent-mindedly calling it the 10 instead of I-10. And you start podcasting. Welcome to said podcast. Space Cadet Sports was started as a passion project because most media is infuriating as a diehard long-term fan of your Houston Astros. Here, we aren't doom and gloom casual Astros fans, or worse, the national media haters. We love our team and root them on, but also try to discuss the ins and outs of them without too much homerism. The key word here, of course, is try. Well, folks, it has been a tough week. It's been a tough week after tough week after tough week. This is the end of the season for your Houston Astros. This is the end of the season episode. Buckle in. It's a sad one, for sure. We'll get to it. But before we completely do, I'd like to welcome returning listeners and welcome new listeners to what my brothers call the Paul Broadpod Ball Blog. Hey, brothers. Shout out to my brothers. Shout out to Arrested Development fans. This is the plug here where I always say check out the Substack, that's spacecadetsports.substack.com for the full blog experience or the full blog experience, depending on your interpretation of my mumbles. We're recording this transmission here in sunny Los Angeles, where I'm joined, as always, by my co-host and co-producer, the Ross to my Frasier. Carla, the dog, is here with me today. Longtime listeners of the podcast know she may get on mic from time to time because she's got the hot takes on this podcast. I try to be a cool solve for you. I try to be there for you, a rock in this emotional roller coaster that can be baseball. Oh boy, but it has been a season. But before I completely jump into it, y'all know I have to wish a good day, mates, to all my listeners. Let's talk about it. The Houston Astros were eliminated from playoff contention. This is the 1st of October that I'm recording this podcast, and it is the first time in 9 years, in almost a decade, that the Houston Astros are not going to the postseason. And I'm reeling. Those of you who've been following this podcast all season long, you know that I predicted them to have 90 wins at the end of at the season's end. They had 87, tied with the Tigers, which was enough to eliminate them from the playoffs from wild card contention because they lost the season series to the Detroit Tigers. So it's a tough one. On top of everything this season, on top of falling short of expectations, on top of keeping us hopeful and invested in the Astros all the way up until the last game of the season, which we'll talk a little bit about that series. It's a little tough. It's a little moot at this point, a moot point at this point. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Look, what I'm trying to say is it was a disappointing end. There's no way around it. I tend to be your cool voice of reason. But of course, I'm going to be emotional about my Astros. It was tough. It was not what any of us wanted. On a personal note, it was tough for me. This Angel series, they really sweated us out. The Houston Astros. It was such the roller coaster the last couple of weeks, sweeping the Rangers, getting swept by the Mariners, and then just limping to the finish line and falling short by just one game. By falling short, but it feels like from just one more hit with runners in scoring position, it's tough. But that's baseball. Baseball is really tough, and I think we've been spoiled as fans for sure. And I know a lot of people. They're like, but we should have won. I want to be angry, and yeah, you could be angry. I'm not telling you can't feel emotion. Me trying to rail against the emotional narratives of baseball that they tend, podcasts and the reporting of sports tends to get people riled up. They want to get you angry, because all media, honestly, you get a bit better reaction out of people when you get them angry, when you get them scared, when you have those terrible emotions, when you rile up bad emotions in your audience. It tends to get you more lucrative results than when you try to give your audience good emotions. So, there's a lot of negativity out there. That's tough. It's tough right now for Astros fans, and I'm going to be here for you. But at the same time, it hurts. So I'm going to be honest with you. We're going through this together, fam. It was tough for me on a personal note, because I couldn't watch the games live. It wasn't just because I'm out here in Southern California in Los Angeles, and the games were blacked out by the MLB. Thanks, MLB. I send you a check each month, and I get blacked out all the time. That, cool. Yeah, I'm not salty. I'm not angry. I'm not transferring my emotions to other things. Get off my back. But also get with it, MLB. It is ridiculous. I'm calling you out. Take that, MLB. The dozens of people that listen to this podcast, we're gonna riot. No, I seriously, it wasn't the normal thing with the Angels games where I kind of have to watch them on a delay, or join Monkey D. Luffy and the Pirates of the Open Sea and find another way to watch the game. No, this past weekend, it was tough for me. I'll get personal for a little bit. We're going through emotions today on the podcast. Let's talk about Paul the Man. I'm always so irreverent and so silly. I rant sometimes, but I don't talk too much about my personal life on here. Those are for other podcasts. But this past weekend, my girlfriend's a good friend. My girlfriend. Oh my goodness. How dare I? My fiance. Good Lord. Gonna get myself canceled on this podcast. No, folks, my fiance's really good friend, and wanted us to come by and pick up some things, because those of you who haven't been paying attention to my personal life, like I said, I don't completely get into it all the time, but we're having a baby, so we're going up there. I'm so excited. It's truly a joy in my life that I needed. I'm very, very saddened and, potentially depressed by the Houston Astros. So it's a good thing that I have all these good things happening in my life. This is a message. Even though I'm frustrated, even though I'm angry, I am trying to remain grateful. So those of you who are very frustrated by your Houston Astros, try to find some things that are going good in your life and focus on those too. But for me, those things called me out to a friend's house that kind of needed a little bit of our help, but also wanted to give us some baby things. So it was a good weekend, but it took me away from the games because we had to travel. I did my best. Look, I felt like I did really good fiance duties, very good husband duties, very good father duties. I didn't get angry. I didn't make a big deal about it. I think I'm even proud of myself. I want to say Sarah did not even know that I was very frustrated by missing the baseball games the whole weekend. And, why make her feel bad? That's just where I was coming from. It's like, at the end of the day, this was the only weekend that we could do this trip. It was just a tough thing for me schedule-wise. It wasn't like she made me do it or she forced me. The fact of the matter is sometimes life is tough. You're forced between a rock and a hard place, and you're going to miss the games. And it was really hard for me because those of you who know me, those of you who listen, know that I say I'm a comedian. This is a comedy podcast, and I want y'all to remember that. I'm not a journalist. I'm not a doctor. I don't give, you go to the experts for expertise. This is an entertainment show. This is comedy. So, so those of you who know that my thing is I watch every game. I'm a super fan. I watch every single game of the Astros every season, 162, not last season. I know you're trying to stump me. Last season we only had 161. But, I watch every game. So not being able to watch these 3 important games was just a nightmare for me, was more emotional. I was watching on my phone, to be honest, when I could, when it was safe to, during our travels, during our adventures, I was also there to help with other things, and I wanted to be helpful. I wanted to lend a hand. I didn't want to, as a man, you're supposed to be selfless. I think there's all kinds of things about what manliness is nowadays, and I think a lot of them can be backwards or just misguided. Perhaps they come from a good place or from a place that makes a little bit of sense, but they're very misguided. But for me, the way I was raised is a man takes care of people, and so I tried my best to act on the lessons that I learned as a man, but my goodness, I was very frustrated that I missed these games. The Astros versus the Angels, they dropped the first game to the Angels 3-4, and honestly, that kind of felt like the nail in the coffin. Sadly, I watched that one a little bit on my phone. I had to watch a little bit on the MLB app towards the end. It was not the best way to experience that game. I've been back home at my house for a couple days, for a day now, and I've started watching the games. That game was a tough one to watch, knowing how important it was. And the Astros won the second and third game of the series, but by the last day of the season, statistically, the Astros were eliminated. They needed to sweep the Angels, and they needed the Tigers or the Red Sox to struggle. And honestly, they almost got it. The Tigers struggled. The Astros just weren't able to sweep the Angels, and that's tough. It was tough, and it was tough to experience on the road when I couldn't watch the games and knew I would have to watch them later. And I'm such a glutton for punishment that yes, I'm watching. I watched all the games, or I'm finishing the third game of the series in the Angels. So I technically can't. I don't want to lie. I'm never trying to misrepresent myself, unless I'm telling a joke or something, But on this podcast I haven't completely watched all 3 games. That is an admission. However, I did watch the recaps. I do know how they ended, but my goodness, folks, it was a tough series, and I can't believe I had to go back and watch after knowing the outcome. I don't know. I'll talk about my plans on watching more Astros games going forward. But before I get completely depressed, my goodness, the energy just really fell, I should say, because I am feeling it. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to drink some coffee. We'll be right back to talk about your Houston Astros and the way their season ended and what we're going to talk about going forward on this podcast. We'll be right back.
Houston Astros, Houston Texans, Houston Rockets, Houston Dynamo, Houston everything, Houston, born and raised, H-Town Rebel, Space Cadet Sports.
And we're back. Welcome back to the Space Cadet Sports Podcast. I'm your irreverent host, Paul Salazar Jr. Thank you for tuning in to just the middle of the episode if you needed that reset. Welcome back to those of you who listen to podcasts like regular human beings. Oh boy, I had a sip of my coffee. I'm feeling a little more energized. Honestly, it's not an energy thing. I try to keep the energy up in my voice just because, hey, I get it. As a performer, I understand with a little bit more energy, keeps you listening. But it's hard to be energetic and talk about how sadly the Houston Astros season had ended. Folks, the Houston Astros, we were talking about that first game of the series, and because it's tough. I it's okay, Carla. Carla agrees that it's tough. We have a delivery happening, or maybe she just was like, after the Seattle series, I was out. She's a doomer. No, Carla's a diehard like me. She has a Houston Astros hat. One of the orange ones. Dogs react to the color orange, I think, So she has that orange hat, and while, she wasn't able to go on the trip with Sarah and I, she had to stay back at Grandma and Grandpa's house, but she wore her Astros hat. She brought it with her to Grandma and Grandpa's house. She was rooting for the Astros. Grandma and Grandpa are actually fans of the Detroit Tigers. She was out there rooting against them. It's tough. Really, at the end of the day, let's kind of talk about. I'm done talking about the Angels series because honestly, it didn't matter. We had to be perfect as a team. The Astros weren't able to do it, and there's just really it seems a little silly at this point in October to break down that last series when what we wanted to happen just didn't happen. So let's kind of talk about the Astros a little bit as we're looking at the end of their season, talking a little bit about our emotions. Let's check in with ourselves emotionally, folks. Let's see how we're feeling. I think, for me, how I'm feeling as somebody who, it's okay, Carla. Carla feels the anxiety within me. Hey, that's enough. That's enough hot takes. Okay. So sorry. So from my perspective, I kind of want to go back. We got plenty of content, plenty of things to talk about going forward. Don't worry. People who have subscribed this whole season, thank you so much. For those of you new subscribers, hello, welcome. Don't worry. We have plenty of things to talk about on the podcast this winter, or this fall and winter, I should say. We're obviously going to start talking about those Texans, oh boy, and the Rockets. We're going to talk football tomorrow. On tomorrow's podcast, I do NFL picks called Paul's Picks. So we'll talk more about the Texans on tomorrow's podcast. Obviously, the Rockets just had their media day. They're starting up their season without Fred VanVleet. Oh boy. The injuries have already started in Houston before the season has begun for the Rockets. After this Astros season, I'm feeling a little PTSD. We were talking about the Houston sports teams, the Big Three, having a sports renaissance just a couple of months ago, and now, my goodness, it does not feel that great. The Houston sports rapture happened, and we're all left behind like Kirk Cameron, and we are feeling miserable with the outlook of the Houston sports teams right now. But don't worry, I'm here for you. But let's talk a little bit about the things that I said on this podcast. We're going to have, I think, at least another segment on another podcast where we can break down and I can laugh a little bit about myself a little more, about some of the bad takes or some of the good takes I've had on the podcast this season. But let's kind of talk broadly, about some of the things that I said this season that didn't come true, or some of the things that kind of were true, or just, at the end of the season, how I'm feeling about some of those calls. Obviously, the one that I said at the beginning of the season, and I had to kind of talk about more and more in September, was the fact that I said the Astros I predicted them to be a 90-win team. I predicted them to win the AL West. And I stand by that. I stand by those predictions. And it's not because I'm a fool. No, I am a fool, obviously. And I have to kind of eat my words a little bit. I mean, I was wrong, but I think at the end of the day, when you look at how many injuries the Astros had, I think me calling it a 90-win season at the beginning of the season was actually a little bit conservative. If you go back during that time, there was a lot of doom and gloomers, a lot of people saying that the Astros' golden era was over already in April. They were saying that, trading away Bregman, trading away Tucker, losing Presley, a lot of big things happening, a lot of big personnel moves, and people were very much dooming that early. in March and April about your Houston Astros not having the same type of talent on the field as they had in previous seasons. And your boy, I was out there telling y'all that I thought that, yes, they could take a step back potentially, but I thought that this was still a very talented team, and if they could lean on their strengths, like pitching, and get the offense going and gelling with this new crew, that they could figure out a way, and the season's long enough that they could figure out a way. I also said that they would win the AL West, because at the beginning of the season, it was a 3-horse race. You know, shout out to Fangraphs, shout out to the people that make the odds at Baseball Reference. You know, they were right, almost all the way down to the wire. All the Rangers were in it to the second to last week of the season. The Astros were in it to the last game of, to the last week of the season for the AL West, I should say. But, you know, like, I really think that it was a tough race this season. I said that the reason why I went with the Astros is because they are the winners of the AL West until they were knocked out, because the Seattle Mariners just hadn't played good when the going gets tough. And this season, you got to tip your hat to them, because that's what they did. They earned a bye, but when we look at it, they did it with 90 wins. The same amount of wins that I said the Astros would have at the beginning of the season, the same amount of wins that I said that would win them the AL West. This team was 3 wins. At the end of the season, the team was 3 wins away from 90. You know, you could split that any way you want with what, maybe sweeping the Mariners instead of getting swept or whatever. You know, all I'm saying is that with all the injuries that the Astros dealt with this season, at the end of the day, I don't think 90 was that wild of a take. Obviously, I could have at some point in the season adjusted that and said, I think they're going to win a little less, but at one point I think I did think, maybe this is 88 instead of 90, but I was like, that seems like I'm splitting hairs. Why would I walk it back? Let's just stick with it and be bold and root them on this season. So, I think, when you're looking at that meme that was being shared from, I believe, Baseball Savant. No, it's from The Athletic. Sorry, Baseball Prospectus. This was from mid-September. This on my phone, it says September 17th. So, this might have changed a little bit during the season. But, at that time, I'm really... This just depends on where you get your stats, But at that time, from Baseball Perspective, the Astros had the most WAR lost due to injuries. At that time, around 12 WAR. So, you're telling me that this team couldn't have won 90 games. The video game team at the beginning of this season. I think I was right. I think y'all were wringing your hands and being doomers at the beginning of the season. Now, obviously, I was wrong because they didn't win their 90 games and they didn't do it at the end. At the end of the day, they won 87. They were kicked out of the playoffs by a lot of teams having to have amazing years. And I think that's another thing we could talk about on the other side of a break here in a bit is the amount of amazing years some of these teams had to have just to knock off the Astros when they were completely hobbled by injuries. And, there's a reaction to people talking about the Astros injury take and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, when they lost the most WAR in the whole league because of injuries, when they had so many injuries this season, it is something that you could take into account. Now, there's a lot of teams that did have injuries too this season that were able to do well, but none of them, I guess the Dodgers is probably the one that comes to mind, but their payroll is beyond God's payroll, which, maybe that's something we should talk about with Jim Crane. But before we get into that, before we talk about Jim Crane, before we talk about the reaction to Houston getting out of the playoffs for the first time in 9 years, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back to have some more Houston Astros talk. It won't be sad completely. Stick with me. We're going through our emotions. We got to process them so we don't turn into angry men and angry people, folks. We'll be right back after a quick break.
Houston Astros, Houston Texans, Houston Rockets, Houston Dynamo, Houston everything, Houston born and raised, H-Town Rebel Space Cadet Sports.
And we're back. Welcome back to the Space Cadet Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Salazar Jr. Carla, the dog, is here with me in studio. She is a little bit more calm and reasonable today. I might be the angry one today, and she's the reasonable one. We shall see who barks more on the podcast at the end of it. Folks, we were talking about my reaction a little bit to the Houston Astros. Missing out on the playoffs, having an 87 win season. Let's talk a little bit about your reaction out there as a, kind of fan base. Let's talk a little bit about the reactions or counter reactions of other people out there, other fan bases. My poor Sarah, when she found out that I missed the last 3 games of the season, when she found out on the drive back, she was asking me why I was so miserable, texting my friends, kind of just cursing to myself a little bit like Joe Pesci in Home Alone, just freaking like, why are you being a Yosemite Sam style cartoon character, and why are you so cranky? She found out about the Astros. She was distraught. She was like, what the hell? She said some more expletives. We try to keep it a little family friendly on the show, but she was like, I can't believe it. And then she was like, that Seattle series, if they just could have figured it out and got that offense cooking. She basically had the same reactions that most Astros fans have had. It is frustrating. There will be a podcast. I'm going to lean into the hot takes for at least one episode. I promise you, we're going to have a scapegoat episode where we figure out who's to blame for this season, obviously with a little bit of a comedic slant. I think it's ridiculous to just blame one thing or one person, but we'll get the suspects out and we'll get the hot takes out. Carla and I will go full stereotypical sports podcast and find the scapegoat for at least one episode. But I was relieved to see that while fans were a little emotional, while they were a little distraught, they did show up to support their Astros. They were in Anaheim supporting their Astros. My good friend, shout out to my good friend Brian and Vivi, shout out to Vivian as well. Brian took his daughter to Angel Stadium the last game of the season, even though we knew there was nothing left really to play for, just to support the team. And there's so much of that going on that made me very, very happy. Of course, there's going to be some casual fans and some bandwagon fans that are out. Fine. Look, if you if you need baseball to just be easy and just be where you win, that's fine. You're a casual fan. Go be a casual fan. Go chase the heat. Follow whatever team you want. It isn't going to be the Texas Rangers this season, that's for sure. So you're going to have to go out of state. But, whatever floats your boat if you want to be a casual fan. But for us diehard fans, most of us were looking back with a lot of nostalgia and a lot of saying, it was such a good run and we've been so spoiled. And that's something I've been saying this whole time. It's nice to hear so many people, echo that too. I feel like while we can be a little frustrated by our team, we all know that is the case, that we've been spoiled by success, that we've had an amazing run with this team. And we also feel fairly confident that that's not necessarily ending, that this is probably going to be, obviously, a turning of the page for the team, but kind of just an off season, and they're going to get back into contention very quickly here. That's for another podcast episode where we'll talk about the future of the Astros, where we look at who's staying on, who's still under contract, who's most likely leaving, and what the team is going to look like next season, and start the projections already. There's no reason not to, folks. What am I going to do this October? I don't know what to do. I've never been a normal baseball fan for almost a decade now. So I don't know what Seattle Mariners fans, tell me, what do y'all normally do during October? Because I'm not used to that. Folks, I really think that all jokes aside, the other fan bases have been waiting for so very long to laugh and take the take a little out of Astros fans here and try to dunk on us, try to do some trolling, that it doesn't even bother me. It's kind of ridiculous at this point. They've been waiting so long, and the team was still good. The team just missed out. A lot of them are happy that they don't have to see the Astros in the postseason. These are just trolling shenanigans that they're saying to try to get a rise out of us. So, I wouldn't fall for it. There hasn't been too much of it, but I would not fall. Don't take the bait from these trolls. Block, report. Don't engage with people online that are just going to steal your happiness. That's not why we're fans. So just, ignore those trolls. There are some people, that are saying like, in a non-trolling fashion, but kind of like sports podcasty trolling way, well, the Astros fans are just so delusional because they're talking about their injuries as if other teams don't have injuries. And that's a take, that's for sure. But it's just so ridiculous because of how many injuries the Astros actually had. Now, if the Astros weren't in contention, kind of like the Orioles, who really struggled with injuries this season and were an abysmal team, then that's another story. If we were completely out of contention and we were just saying, hey, it was the injuries, a lot of teams would have a little bit more validity to that argument that other teams have injuries too. The Astros injuries were astronomical this season. Truthfully, we played without Yordan Alvarez. We played without Ronel Blanco. We played without Spencer Getty. We played a good portion of the season without Jake Myers. We played a good portion of the season without Christian Javier. We barely got any Luis Garcia. There's so many names that we just could have used, as service, like as solid players, dependable players on this team, and they just weren't able to be that healthy, or they were coming back from injury in the case like Christian Javier, who actually was able to support the team coming back from injury better than most of the other options that were coming back from injury this season. Because you think about Spencer Getty, you think about Lance McCullers Jr., you think about Luis Garcia, those guys were trying to come back from injury but just could not really, they just couldn't really stay healthy or figure it out. I don't want to say that I think there's a lot of people that have a lot of weird speculation about the Houston Astros training staff, and I think that just has to do with general sports injury that can be very tough to navigate for a lot of teams. And because of the volume of injuries for the season, I understand people's frustration around the medical staff. I just think that's kind of, I guess it's more like anecdotal as opposed to scientific. Like it just, yes, maybe we could use a better medical staff. I don't know. But also at the end of the day, it was a freak amount of injuries, and every body is different. Like truthfully, and you don't know how recovery is going to be. So a lot of those slow recoveries were very frustrating. The fact that maybe Yordan really never was healthy this season was tough. A lot of the people on the team either missed some time, or like Jeremy Pena, obviously Isaac Paredes. I already mentioned Jake the Rake Myers. Then we also had a lot of role players that just were underwhelming or just were gone with injury too. Brendan Rodgers, Luis Guillorme, Chas McCormick. There's so many, like even Zach DeZenzo. I feel like I should have written down all the injuries, obviously. But the point of the matter is that the Astros dealt with a lot. It was overwhelming, and yeah, people can say that it's an excuse, but I really think that at the end of the day, that's what knocked us out. That plus Seattle having an amazing run, the Cleveland Guardians having an amazing run, Toronto really having a stellar season. I think at the end of the day, when you look at all the things that had to go right for other teams for the Astros to be out of the playoffs, it was a bad luck year for the Astros. And sadly, we're not used to that as Astros fans, because the Astros have been consistently lucky and consistently good and great with their backs against the wall when the pressure is on. They needed one more game. They needed a little more time to get right. And we have seen in the past that the hot teams tend to go to the postseason, and the teams that cool off tend to find themselves out on the outside looking in. And the Astros have not been that team for 9 seasons. So that's definitely tough to deal with, folks. And I think at the end of the day, yes, I am sad. I am disappointed. It's frustrating. The amount of times that the Astros could have got a hit with a runner in scoring position, and that might have just been enough to get us to the postseason. That's not going to sit well with anybody. But also, at the end of the day, I think this could be a potentially great thing for the Houston Astros as an organization. And this is going to be another podcast, too, where we'll do a Silver Linings podcast where we'll talk about how this possibly could be a good thing for the Houston Astros. And my take here essentially is that this team has got pretty content, that they know that they're a good team. They know that they're a good organization. I think this is going to light a fire under them. This is going to put that chip right back on their shoulder. After winning the 2022 World Series, that kind of chip on their shoulder, that kind of swagger, we got to prove them wrong attitude, maybe has dwindled a little bit. And now this is another thing to put some fire under this team, to get some fire under the new guys. Now that this is kind of a new era of Astros baseball, get a fire under them so that they can be like, no, we're still a good organization. This new era is going to still be a great era for Houston Astros fans. I want to see that. And Correa being there, Altuve still being there, with the newcomers out, Isaac Paredes and Christian Walker, we still have some guys that have a lot of fight and we have a lot of competitiveness in them. And I think this team can easily bounce back next season, but that's for another podcast. Folks, as I'm wrapping it up here today, it's tough. It's not what any of us wanted. It isn't what I predicted. It wasn't what I was asking for. It was frustrating. We never went full panic mode, but we did start panicking at the end of the season. It was tough. This whole season was a roller coaster of emotions for me, and I know it was one for you too. I hope that I was able to help calm you down this season, to help let you know that baseball is super important. We all love it, but there's no reason why it should run our lives emotionally. Let's try to be a little reasonable. Let's try to actually be upset about the things that we should be upset about in this life. Let's try not to take out our emotions on other things, displace how we feel. I hope I was here for you. Because I know that it was a tough season. It was a tough season for me. It was a tough year for me personally. There's been so many ups and downs this season, baseball season for me, that it was a tough year all around. And this is not how I wanted it to end. And I know it wasn't how y'all wanted it to end. But there are still so many great things that this organization has given us. There are so many great things that I know are happening in your life that you just maybe need to take a little extra look, take an extra moment to find them and feel good again. Take that moment. Also, we're going to be grateful for what this team has given us, and we're going to look ahead because I really think the Astros have a bright future. Zach Cole, Cam Smith, anybody, maybe some AJ Blueball. Folks, we are very excited to talk about more Astros stuff going forward. Not just breaking down this season, talking through our emotions, but also talking about next season and how excited we are for that. Folks, with that being said, that's going to do it for this transmission, Space Cadets. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. We will have another one out tomorrow with Paul's Picks where we're talking about NFL. We'll talk a little bit about the Rockets on that one as well. Please like, rate, review, subscribe, share, bop it, kick it, skip it, smash all of those buttons for me. We are a small podcast and only go as far as our listenership takes us. We are supported by listeners like you. So please share with the Houston fan or Australian in your life and give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to this podcast on. It really helps us. Thank you so much. If you'd also like to help us, check out the Substack at spacecadetsports.substack.com, where you can get all the podcasts, all the little articles and memes I've been doing, all for free. Right now, we don't have, every now and then, I'll have a post that's behind the paywall for the premium. The premium is just a way to support the podcast. You could do that 5-star rating. You can go to Substack, subscribe there, become a premium subscriber if you want to help support us financially. Help us get better podcast equipment, help Carla get some treats. We would appreciate that. Definitely check out us on social media at Space Cadet Sports, at Space Cadet Sports Pod. That at bluesky.social. Definitely let us know how you feel on social media. Let us know how you are doing emotionally. We are here for you. I'm a dad to all now. I will father you, give you some fatherly advice, and be there for you if you need it. Merch is here, folks. You can get a Don't Sleep on Houston basketball. Well, they're hats, but obviously that's a Kelvin Sampson reference there. Don't Sleep on Houston merch. You can get Carla the dog hats in H-Town blue. That's at paulsalazarjr.net, because I'm nothing but net. If you like me, if you've gotten this far, you can find me making weird jokes, memes, art, podcasts, and so much more at paulsalazarjr on social media, paulsalazarjr.net, where you can find my other Substack and all my other nonsense if you're nasty. Thanks so much for listening. Remember to be the best that you can be. Keep your head up, kid. And as always, vamos Astros.